Next item is a public hearing, Director of Planning regarding design review case number PDR 2007-126-PI, located at P1, located at 128132 South Kenwood Street. Motion approving Stage 1 design review, subject to comments and conditions from the city's principal urban designer and the council.
This is a public hearing, and I will open the public hearing. Go to Mr. Starbird.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, you've been in this position as a redevelopment agency on many occasions, and that's to review proposed development projects within the redevelopment project area. This is the first city development proposal coming before you as the city council for design review of a project within downtown specific plan, but outside of the redevelopment project area. With that notation, let me turn to Hassan Agani, Director of Planning. Hassan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. And this was, as you remember, the follow-up to the streamlining of the process, and to not complicate it, so we are mirroring the same process that you've been following with the redevelopment applications. So, as such, Rather Duong, the case planner, will give a brief presentation. Mr. Loomis will be here to answer questions regarding design, and then the applicant will give their presentation of the project.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor and members of the City Council. I'm Rather Duong with the Planning Department. The case before you today is case number, as stated, PDR 2007-126-P1. The location of the project is at 128 and 132 South Kenwood Street, and the applicant is Mr. Rodney Kahn. The applicant is proposing to construct a new 4-story stacked 28 dwelling units apartment with 2 levels of subterranean parking for 63 spaces, 7 of which will be guest parking spaces. 23 units are 2-bedroom units, while 5 units are 1-bedroom units. The applicant is requesting a preliminary review at this time. An environmental application will be processed prior to the final review phase, and will be brought forth before the council at that time. The zone is DSP, as stated, specifically located in the East Broadway district, but outside of the redevelopment project area. The project site consists of 2 lots with a combined lot area of 15,000 square feet. A total of 3 buildings and 4 units will be demolished in preparation for this project. The building located at 128 South Kenwood Street has been identified by the Downtown Specific Plan EIR as being historically significant and will require a full historic assessment. And this assessment and the finding from assessment will be included in the environmental review and initial study. This building was constructed in 1920 built in the craftsman style. The proposed building will have a height of 50 feet, 4 stories. With a floor area ratio of 2.25 or 33,800 square feet. In the DSP zone, the maximum allowable floor area ratio is 2.50, which for this project site equals to 37,500 square feet. As you can see, the project is under the maximum allowed by code. The setback provided that will be provided by the project in the front will be 10 feet, 5 along the rear, and 5 along the side. The minimum setback in the front in this zone is 6 feet. And again, the applicant is providing 10 feet, therefore exceeding code. However, there is no setback requirement along the side and along the rear for this zone. And the DSP further identifies Kenwood Street as having a residential street frontage. The unit size ranges from 774 square feet for the 1-bedroom to 1,310 square feet for the 2 bedrooms. All units meet the minimum size requirement for the respective bedroom size or bedroom count. In regards to the open space, the DSP requires that the project meets 2 types of open space requirement. One is 10% of the lot be landscaped based on the lot area. So in this case, 1,500 square feet of landscape will be provided based on the lot size. And half of that, which is 5%, needs to be publicly accessible open space. The applicant is showing that the public open space will be provided in the front yard setback. And in addition, the project also calls for 140 square feet per unit be provided as landscape also. I mean, this 140 square feet could be common or private. It does not have to be one or the other. Now let's look at the adjoining uses for this project. To the north is the vacant lot, but further north, as you can see, there is a project known as the 416, which is a mixed-use project currently under construction. To the south are two-story apartment buildings, which totals about 38 units. To the west is the high-rise senior apartment building known as Casa de la Paloma. This building consists of 167 units. And to the east is an alley as well as some office building and apartment buildings. The building is designed in the modern craftsman style and will be built around a central courtyard. It's rectangular in shape, and the courtyard will include a children's play area as well as some seating areas for the tenants. Access to the subterranean parking will be taken off of the alley located at the rear, which is a positive to this project because this will free up the front yard setback to be an uninterrupted open space. The principal urban designer, Mr. Alan Loomis, in working with the applicant and the architect, has identified some areas in the building design and site planning that could use some modification. And those are the conditions that are contained in the motion before you. The first common condition is that the roof line could be given greater diversity by selectively removing some of the exaggerated eaves. The second one is the use of horizontal siding could continue to the second and third level. The third comment, the design of the two patios on the first level fronting Kenwood Street could address the street better if provided with direct access to and from the sidewalk via steps and stoops. Fourth comment, the podium of the building could be improved with the use of decorative masonry such as stone, decorative concrete block, or brick. The material would blend in well with the proposed landscape palette and will add another design interest to the building. Fifth comment, it may be more beneficial to the overall design if the main entry tower is relocated to the southern end of the property. This design modification would provide additional opportunity for an improved public accessible open space, lend to a more usable outdoor space, provide a better flow to the interior courtyard, and an improved access to the elevator. This recommendation will necessitate, however, changes to the floor plan. As a consequence, this move will also break the symmetry of the front facade, leading to greater visual diversity. And the last comment, the applicant is to submit a public art plan as required by the downtown specific plan. At this time, time or location have not been identified just yet. Mr. Alan Loomis, as well as the applicant and architect, are here to address further about the design and the site planning of this project. And I'm available to answer any question you may have. Thank you. And also, there are exhibits brought forth by the applicant today for your review as well.
Okay, I have a question. I'm not sure if it's to Rather or to Alan, mainly about the process here. And we're sitting as a design review board for a project in the redevelopment area, or the DSP, the DSP. And you made mention that on one of the lots is a house, it's a craftsman house, it may very well be deemed historic. Why should this design review come before the assessment of that property as historic or non-historic?
Well, the finding from the environmental review or the historic assessment will be included in the initial study. At this time, the applicant is really more interested in getting feedback from the City Council in terms of the design and the direction where the project is going, and whether there should be major changes to the overall design prior to approval by City Council.
So there's a preliminary.
Correct.
So this is not an approval.
The final.
This is the stage one,
Yes.
and we have a stage two.
Correct.
There is no stage three. Stage two is the last
But
stage.
between stage one, stage two, will have the historical assessment.
Correct.
And the EIR and everything else.
The environmental needs to be done at the time Stage 2 would come to you, so that'll be done in advance of Stage 2.
Okay.
So consider this a preliminary, which is what it's called, the DSP.
So let's talk about massing. That's what the DRB likes to talk about, and since we're sitting as the DRB,
Do we have any more
why,
cards?
we do have cards. We do have cards, but I'd like to, let me throw that question out, and perhaps the applicant should best respond to it.
would be best.
Devil's advocate, don't you think that that's too much massing on that lot? 4 stories at 50 feet is too imposing on the neighborhood, and even though the code says you can build up to that or even higher, that doesn't mean we should let you build to the maximum. I've heard those remarks on several different projects, not multifamily, but I'm sure at some point it would come out, so.
Well, that's certainly a fair question. I'll let the applicant address this specific design in more detail. But I would say on two aspects that are relevant in this particular project. One is that this project, as rather noted, is not being built to the maximum allowed, either the maximum ceiling allowed at the 4 stories, or in fact, because they're not asking for any incentives to allow for any bonus, they're not even going to the full potential maximum that they could allow. So they're below the maximum already. They're not building to the maximum.
What
by
was the
code.
full height maximum?
Well, their full height maximum in terms of the number of stories at 4.
Yes.
If they were to apply for the incentives, they could build up to 5
And the
stories.
incentives would be based on affordable?
Yeah, correct. They could provide affordable housing that would allow them to go to 5 stories. Additional public open space, if they were to provide a public garden on the sidewalk size, would allow them to go there. The other aspect in regards to that is the open space requirements in the downtown specific plan are in fact relatively high. As rather said, it's 10% of the site area plus 140 square feet per residential unit. And of that, 5% of the site area is required to be usable by the general public. So the challenges of meeting those requirements require applicants to be fairly clever in how they arrange the massive buildings in the open space. So the downtown specific plan has a number of tools built into it, as well as the overall design guidelines in terms of articulating the scale of buildings that I think provide a lot more direction than we see elsewhere in the city and a number of the projects where the comments that you've alluded to have been raised.
And one of the comments, Alan, that I think you had suggested was that the horizontal siding be moved up another story,
Right, that's a suggestion.
raise the belt line.
Effectively. That's one of the various comments we made. That's one that I think is a comment, a friendly suggestion that could be taken under advisement by the council and the applicants. We've not seen that suggestion as a thought that may help reduce some of the apparent mass of the building by making it appear to be a 3-story building with a penthouse as opposed to effectively a 4-story building with a heavy base. I'd like to sort of highlight 2 things on Rather's presentation. Of the comments we made, 2 of them are conditions to meet the downtown specific plan rules. One is the public art plan, which, as I've said, they indicate they intend to provide, but we don't know in what manner yet. And the second is to provide the publicly accessible open space. As the project's been presently designed and presented to you, they're not meeting the intent of the public open space. They have roughly 1,000 square feet of lawn and the front setback to the building, but because that lawn will be landscaped, it's really not intended for the public to use it or sit in it. So they need to provide effectively a wider entry court to the building that would be equal to 750 square feet with some benches. And in fact, we were discussing with the applicants before you came in some options to address that. So that's, of the comments we made, there are 2 conditions. The rest are friendly suggestions.
Mr. Weaver, then Mr. Quintero.
Mr. Loomis, I understand what you're saying about the public open space, but do you really think the people, if this is built, people are going to come down, walk onto that grass in front of that apartment and sit down and have a bite to eat or relax on the grass?
No, and that's the point of the comment. They really need to provide effectively a kind of paved area with benches or seating probably in front of the entryway to the project. It would really, in this case, probably be used more for people who are visiting residents of the building as a place for them to wait.
Out front?
Yes, it needs to be accessible to the general public, so it needs
But
to be
you
out front.
actually think the people will go and sit there from the community?
As I said, in this case, because we're only talking about 750 square feet worth of space, it would probably be more actively used by people visiting residents in the building.
Well, if I'm visiting, I'm not going to sit down on a bench there. I'm going to go visit them. And to me, I know we must have made the rule, but I just do not see people sitting on front lawns or benches in front of apartment buildings in Glendale.
Mr. Hagani, if you're going to address that issue, and then to Mr. Quintero after.
We did come up with the rule, if you remember, during the downtown
Sure we
strategic
did.
plan process. But remember that as we were envisioning the future of downtown, we're envisioning a downtown that's active, and people are walking on the sidewalks, going to places. And one of the ideas that we had for these types of small publicly accessible open spaces is that if you are a person walking with your dog and you need to take a rest, you can have a bench immediately accessible to you. It's not like creating a park, but having these brief moments of relief and pleasant sitting down, people watching, and that adds to the activities in the downtown and to the interest and people interacting, even if it's silent silent observation of each other. That's the type of interaction we want to create. Even if it's for a brief moment, it makes a difference. That's what we assume.
I guess we all have our own opinions. Open space is one thing, but I think the public's going to sit there. I think that's a very, very far reach in this community.
Mr. Quintero.
So that is the law. There's no...
Well, that's what we did.
That's kind of what were you thinking, Mr. Weaver, when you passed
I
that
heard
law?
about getting relief on the front lawn. If you're walking a dog, I know what that means.
And for this particular... For this particular project, it would mean what, 720...
750 square feet.
750 square feet.
You're going to go down and sit there?
Now, in terms of your comment number one, roof line could be given greater diversity by selectively removing some of the exaggerated eaves. What do you mean by that?
Well, as you see on the elevations and perspectives, there's a number of sort of big exaggerated eave lines at the roof, right at the roof line. The eave projects out approximately, it would appear to be about 12 inches, and that's a uniform feature throughout the entire building. The suggestion, again, a sort of comment and friendly suggestion, is that if some of the mass of the building, say, for example, the White Towers, did not have that exaggerated eave, the building might appear to be a little less sort of looming and hovering. There'd be a little bit greater diversity on the roof line. So again, I
And
think
what is
that's
he
a
showing over the windows? Those are eaves, but running parallel to the building, is that correct? Over the individual windows, there appear to be
Window shades.
Yeah.
window shades, eaves.
Yes, I think the applicant
Yeah.
could probably address exactly what they intend there, but my understanding is they're kind of window shade detail.
Mr. Draymond, then Mr. Youssef.
I want to come back to, Alan, please, I want to help me along here. I'm the only one up here that can plead innocence when it comes to the issue Mr. Weaver is raising. By the way, I can understand that when you're talking about, I don't know about this particular block and this particular setting, but with some buildings, certainly, especially in a downtown area where there's a lot of heavy traffic. But I just have a basic question about this, a little off the topic maybe, but in this front area that's supposed to be public area, not open space in the sense of a park, but with benches. So I'm walking down the street and I say, gosh, I need a rest, and I want to sit there, and I trip and break my ankle. Who am I suing?
Can I defer that question to one of our attorneys?
With this public area that our city has said the applicant must create?
Is it a dangerous condition that causes you to trip?
Sprinkler head, anything.
To extent it's private property would be the property owner.
Even though we've mandated that it should be accessible to the public on private property. So can you help me out just a little further then, Alan? This truly is an area where you can help me. On some kind of diagram either that is up or one that we have in our report, can you sort of elaborate for me what the what we are saying needs to be there? I'm not quite, I understand what 750 square feet is, but I'm not quite sure I understand what I'm seeing there. And I'm getting help from my colleague. For those who are tuning in, those arms are not mine.
He's talking about this being bigger.
Okay. Alan, I know you can't see.
Mr. Yusefian was pointing to
Yes, those were Mr.
the paved
Yusefian's
area leading
arms
to the front door. That's
coming in.
correct.
Yes. You're saying that entryway should be larger?
And with benches.
with
Seating area is a requirement. Some sort of seating, whether it's benches or portable seating, is a requirement in the specific plan as well.
Okay. And then number 5 up here, it may be more beneficial to the overall design of the main entry tower if the main entry tower is located to the side. Please help me out. We're talking about, it sounds like we're hanging our hat on symmetry versus non-symmetry, or A being asymmetrical. What's the thought on that? No, I understand those terms.
Okay.
Get your arms out of the frame. I understand the terms. I want to know what Alan has in mind.
And the issue of asymmetry versus symmetry on this particular facade, there is, in this particular project, there is nothing in the specific plan that would suggest this should be an asymmetrical building versus symmetrical building. That would be the case if this was a corner site, where we wanted to emphasize an important corner in the downtown. For example, in BJ's Restaurant, we asked them to do that. In this particular case, the suggestion is an opportunity to more efficiently use the open space that they've provided. Because there's a sort of side yard setback, because it's so narrow, it doesn't count towards their open space. So we made the suggestion to the applicant, and they can respond on how they feel about that, that potentially if they located this sort of entry passageway to the south end of the site, they could take advantage of the side yard setback as part of their open space. It would overall be a more efficient use of the open space on site, and would allow them to count that towards their open space requirement, potentially towards the publicly accessible requirement. I think the applicant, in discussion with them, has some relatively strong feelings about that suggestion, and that's really more of a suggestion about how to efficiently use the open space on site, and not necessarily one about the symmetry versus asymmetry of the facade.
I have one last question, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
My last question has to do with just conceptually, when we start talking to an applicant about the use of the interior courtyard area on a project that is not owned, where the property is not owned by the city, it is not a public building, and the applicant is not asking for any assistance from the city, why would we be even making suggestions as to how to re-engineer open space within the project, when, to me, it would seem that that's sort of the applicant's, not only their area, but it's their own risk. I mean, they're the ones selling this, or either, I mean, if it isn't aesthetically pleasing or workable to a potential buyer, they're the ones that are stuck with the problem. I'm just not sure conceptually why we're into that.
Well, you're correct in that. With one sort of exception. One, there are requirements for the amount of open space and dimensional characteristics of open space, and a percentage of green vegetation landscape that's built into the specific plan. So to the extent that those are the rules, we have an interest in ensuring applicants conform to the rules. In this particular case, our suggestion is really a matter of how to achieve the publicly accessible open space requirement by taking advantage of what's currently side yard space that they're not counting because it's too small, by shifting the entrance. So the comment that begins to address the interior flow of the courtyards is really about how to meet one of the current deficiencies of the design, which is they don't have enough open space accessible to the public.
I see. Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Yusefian.
Let me go to some of your comments. There is, I don't think, unless you can specifically point out to the section in the the ordinance that says you have to have benches there on the open public right-of-way. We dealt with this issue when we went through the Armenian Society, and I think the way we dealt with that, could somebody put up that drawing that basically has A3? There should be a copy of that.
One.
Okay, because it doesn't show the green as well. Okay, I think maybe somebody can focus on this. Hello? Somebody downstairs, just focus on what's on my hand.
You're not on camera, Mr.
Okay, right in here, well, that's not picking up either, if it was close. You could see all of this is green, all of this is green, and this section right in here is the paved section. Now, what we did with another project, we asked them to create a short wall in here so people actually could sit on it and act as a bench. The same recommendation was brought up about the Armenian Society, and I'm pretty sure we're going to be seeing this over and over again. At the time I approved the downtown specific plan, the purpose of open space is open green space. To me, it's not open space when it's all paved with concrete, pavers, asphalt. Hardscape to me is not appealing. I rather see grass and plants and trees, and that's what the public open space to me is. As you drive by, you look at that building, and it's not starting right at the edge, and it's just paved, and it's stark, and it's dead. I wanted it to be live. Now, I do agree with Mr. Weaver. I don't think anybody's going to just walk their dog and sit on a bench there. If somebody's going to be waiting for somebody to be picked up or something of that nature, they could probably use the top of that wall to sit there for a few seconds. I also do not want to put in furniture that enables more homeless to kind of hang around that area. We're doing all kinds of stuff trying to detract from that type of a use. So that's my point on this item. So the only thing I would like to see, and based on the staff report, they're providing 1,000 square feet of open space, which is required 750 square feet. And to me, this is open space, to me, what they have done. Now, I would agree with you that I think if they did a little bit of a pony wall in here instead of just flat, then maybe you could sit on it and finish it up like a bench, so you could sit on there, not too high, so it's easier to do that. The second point you brought up is what goes on the top. And I think we have gone through this several times with other projects, as far as, and watched enough design review board meetings. Anytime you design a building, you want to have a base. You want to say, this is my base, and my building is on top of it. And we have done this also with the projects that is a little bit further down from us on Broadway, which has a base out of brick, and then the rest of it changes. This building is no different. It's doing the same thing. It's just using siding on a base and then shows up the rest of it. I think it will be more in context if we do it this way instead of increasing the siding up. I'm pretty sure siding will be better for him. It'll be cheaper, but I don't think you were going to get a very nice building. It would look awkward. It will not give it the height that it deserves. The third thing is all the overhangs that you're suggesting eliminate. I strongly suggest you drive around some of the neighborhoods that, especially on Chevy Chase, between Central and San Fernando Road, and as you're traveling westbound, look to your left as you're driving. Make sure you also look at the roads. But you would see a couple of buildings that have roofs on them that are metal roofs, and they come and they terminate right on the edge of the stucco. Stucco is white, with lines running down every single joint from dirt, grime, and everything else. This is one of those things that the designers always miss, and us contractors always get called on and yelled at, is that designers only think about giving it birth. It looks nice, it's beautiful, but how does it live and how does it maintain is not their problem, because they're done, they're gone. They got the nice little picture they put in their portfolio, they're out of there. But the contractor gets called all the time when they have leakage problems because the edge wasn't done properly, or the capping, coping on top of it didn't get sealed right, or it didn't have the right lip on it and it leaks. This type of a design, it's a very good design. It's designed to increase the longevity and maintain the stucco face, especially where you have stucco. If you have wood or stucco, it really helps you because it keeps the dirt from hitting the face of the stucco as much, especially when you have a white building. And I'm hoping this is not just plain old white, it's a little bit creamish color. At least that's how it looks in here. But overall, I would say with the exception of I would agree with you on the art part. I think you have to submit that. I think the rest of the building, to me, is nice. I don't have a problem with whether it be symmetrical or not. I think it's fine. It's very balanced. The only thing is we will deal with the historical thing when it comes on the EIR. I think maybe you guys can work on creating some kind of a benching type of a thing as they go up. But part of my vision in the downtown is not to create a lot of hardscape. This is different than what's on Brand Boulevard. My comments would be completely different if this was on Brand Boulevard. It's not. This is in an off-street, more residential type of a thing. It's across the street from, I think, if I'm not mistaken, there is affordable senior housing. Is that correct? Yeah. And that has a nice big lawn in the front, and I think it's a Presbyterian home, if I'm not mistaken. Am I right on that? I see heads, yeah. And if that's the one, I think it's an 8-story building, brown, and it has a nice front setback. It's all grass and so on and so forth. So it's consistent to what's across the street, and it looks nice to me. So that's my point with some of these things. I don't have a problem with this project, and I think the Todd lot, it's a good idea. I think that's the amenity they chose to put in. Instead of a pool or something of that nature. I don't think you mandate that. We don't mandate that. They decide to do that. They just have to put an amenity, and that's what's in the code. So those are my comments. So and a quick recap. Code is 65. This is 50. Code is 2.5. This is 2.25. Code is 5% public accessible open space, which is 750. This is 1,000. Other open space, code is 4,670 square feet. This is 4,773 square feet. Is it accurate? Because this is what I'm reading off the staff report. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Let's hear from Rodney Kahn.
That's okay. Try to use it.
Rodney, are you do you own this property?
Yes, I'm the developer of this property.
Okay. I thought you had another different one.
Rodney Kahn. My offices are located here in the city of Glendale. Couple comments to add.
I have a question
to what's been discussed.
Before he goes on. Who's your expediter?
I don't know. I'm looking for a good one. In terms of what's been discussed up to this point, as was pointed out, so I won't repeat what's already been said, directly across the street from us it's actually a 10-story building.
Oh, it's 10-story.
But it's a very nicely maintained building. I think this area in the city, this East Broadway area, and this is one of the reasons that we wanted to invest in Glendale and develop on this site, was because of what the amenities are and what's being built in the area. North of us is the 416, which is Intracorp's project, which is coming out of the ground now. In terms of what's going on in the area, you all know that. There's the Central Park, adult recreation facility, the main library, the post office, and a couple blocks away is the Americana brand, which is also coming out of the ground very quickly and very nicely. So we thought this project at this location was going to work out in terms of what we were envisioning for the site. We do not have any exceptions. We are not utilizing any of the incentives. We actually designed something that was not needing those items. And the reason we did that was for two reasons. One is because in terms of the site and what's going on in the area, we thought it would be a small infill project that had clean lines. I liked the contemporary craftsman feel. I felt that that worked very well for that area. We also were able to keep more of a pedestrian priority. We are taking our parking, which is 2 levels of subterranean parking. All the parking stalls are standard stalls. There's no tandem parking spaces. There's no mechanical lifts. There's nothing like that. But we were able to take our parking in off of the alley. And what that allows is that we don't have it creates kind of a safer, uninterrupted frontage where there's no vehicles coming on the traffic. So that's what I'm speaking about when I say pedestrian priority. There's already been discussion about our open space. We have the public open space in the front, and as Mr. Yusefian pointed out, we either meet or exceed the code as it relates to public open space. We have common open space amenities. We also have private open space, which is in the form of balconies and patios for each one of the units. In terms of the symmetry or asymmetry, I felt very strongly about that. I don't think that there's anything wrong with symmetry. And in this particular site on an interior lot, it felt very balanced. It felt, in terms of the overall design, that it had a nice feel or flow to it. At least that's what I felt. So in terms of a symmetrical design, I really like that it is symmetrical. That is our preference. That is what we see many of the buildings in town being designed as, and that's where we would like this project to be designed as well. The mass and scale I already spoke to a little bit about. In terms of the heights, the numbers were read off by Mr. Yusefian, so I won't repeat that. I'll conclude my presentation on that note, and if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
So parking is off the alley?
Yes, it is.
Okay, Mr. Weaver?
Yeah, on Kenwood on the front, I thought it would look good to get the first floor up a few, 2 or 3 feet from the sidewalk for security. There's something about having people walk by and looking in your window at the same level, towards having stoops, not necessarily to enter off of Kenwood, but to just get it up off the street level. Is that possible to do?
Mr. Weaver, right now, and let me go to our staff report, because in the back of the staff report there are some plans. The answer is yes, that is something we can do. Currently, if you look at sheet A3, our board A3.
A3, yeah. So I'm looking at.
What it shows is you show about 6 steps that are coming in from the ground level, walking up into the entry. So that's about 3 feet.
Okay.
So that level is at the same level as the units are at. So it's actually about 3 feet elevated from the sidewalk level.
Well, when I look at A7A, looks like it's at street level. Do you have higher ceilings in those units?
Let me get to A7A.
It's in the green shading. Shows people walking, shows a tree, and it shows the first floor units at the same grade level.
No, but that's not what it shows.
Unless I'm missing something.
Right, so you're looking at the sidewalk.
Yes.
Right. And then in terms of where our entry is.
I see the entry,
Right.
but then it looks like you're stepping down into a living room, something with a high ceiling. Something doesn't add up.
Let me bring my architect up here because I'm not.
Because if you're going up
Maybe
straight
I'm
and
not
you're at
understanding
one
your
level, then how does that jive with A7A?
I think...
No, I'm asking the applicant. You want to bring up your architect, somebody to tell me?
Let me bring up my architect.
That's
Have you
the
looked at
side.
A8? That may give a different perspective as well.
Yeah.
Well, that's the side of
A8
the
is the
building.
same thing.
That's the side of the building.
Is that just the side of the building?
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
that
brought up,
the
it's a
the
false
buildings
front.
go all the way down.
It's a
the
false
side.
front.
Well, that's not the front, that's the side.
Maybe that clarifies it. You have a false front, according to A8.
Yes, good afternoon. My name is Ruiz Stroy, I'm the architect.
I think you answered the question.
Actually, I'm trying to answer. Actually, what we're showing on the first floor plan,
I think I got my question answered. It's a false front, and it is actually stepping up.
it's not a false front, actually. If you look at the perspective here, or even the front elevation, the balconies are shown that are raised or is higher than the sidewalk level.
Right.
That difference, the height difference, is actually give or take about 36 inches, 3 feet, which is shown the steps or the stairs necessary to reach to that level.
It's my mistake. Trying to assume Mr. Yousef's going to say the same thing. On A8, it shows a rectangular box, which apparently is a false area, was simply to get it up there.
To give us the additional height.
Yes, so it's just a...
That is a trapped area under the first floor ceiling, which will...
He's fine with it. Did answer
Yeah.
the question.
I got it answered.
Okay.
Thanks.
I looked at the wrong drawing.
It's okay.
Mr. Yusefian?
I think they got his answer.
They got it? Okay.
All done.
Mr. Draymond?
Just a comment to the applicant. On the summary comments and recommendations page, there's number 6, which talks about public art. I would just like to ask if you would please, this is by no means any accusation, it's just a comment as observed from lots of other projects, not yours, just projects in general.
Sure.
That whatever that is, to satisfy the downtown specific plan, that it not just be plop art, that it be something that means something. Just a request. Yes. I'm sure Hassan can explain to you all what plop art is if you don't know.
Enlighten me. I don't know what plop art is.
I'll give it a shot. A plop art is when something that you think in the aftermath of having designed the project, you have not given some thought to the context of the design of the project and finding a real home during the design process, and as an afterthought, you come and buy a piece of art and plop it somewhere on the property to meet the satisfaction.
Okay, I see.
Thank you. I have a card from Herbert Milano. Oh, Mr. Milano.
I don't know, Mr. Chair. My name is Herbert Milano. If I have property, but it's not within 300 feet, am I still allowed to make an opinion on this?
Yes, you are.
You're not within 20.
All right. I do have property on Kenwood, and I do have a very personal experience with regard to generally the traffic, the pedestrian traffic. And I personally happen to know that, especially with my tenants, when they're waiting for someone, especially the elderly and they're bringing the kids, that they sit on the steps of the apartment building waiting, either waiting for a ride or waiting for transportation and so forth. So it's a very common thing, I believe me, in this area. So having an amenity out there to help the public, I think, will be very, very useful. I think that the design overall is pretty nice. I think that if this is the direction that Glendale is going, and this is the first project, I think we're going in the right direction. I particularly like the fact that we have sufficient parking, no tandem parking, that,
No variance.
it would have been pretty tough for Mr. Khan to come back and provide something that was not compliant. So this is, I think it's fantastic that there are no variances here. What I do have a couple of comments with regard to the, whether this project is part of the pipeline project or not. In other words, whether it will have some type of the park impact fees applied, because it's amazing that this project is only a block and a half away from the adult recreation center or Central Park, which opens up again the issue that for the children of this area and for future residents that come in to live in these condominiums and similar type buildings, that we provide the adequate parkland. And as you know from the map that I gave you earlier on the previous discussion, the only park that really addresses the need for this particular property is Central Park. And our need to be able to provide adequate parkland and expand the green space, I think, is absolutely crucial for us to think about that. The other side issue that I want to bring up is that we do have a recycled water main, if I can call it, on Colorado Boulevard. And by looking at where recycled water was used, I know it's not required for residential buildings, but we only have 3 office buildings using recycled water, according to the records that I looked at. And it's a shame that we're not moving more aggressively towards the use of recycled water. I know it might be a little bit too far for this particular project, but Colorado Boulevard is not that far away. So I'm sorry, I'm looking at Broadway, so I may be way off with regard to the distance. But I do like the fact that this type of project, if I would imagine a whole city block with similar type buildings, that it really has the 2 things that you want, the additional density and the type of pedestrian traffic environment that we need. But I would like to have the question with regard to the impact fees addressed. Thank you.
Mr. Quintero?
Well, I want to say, Mr. Milano, that I'm appalled. You have measured your tenants who live south of the 134. You measured their need for a place to sit while they're waiting to come back and forth from your building, and you haven't acted. What are you waiting for? I'm expecting.
You might say that's a real benchmark. That's a true benchmark.
That's a true. I'm expecting a bench, and then actually at least monthly reports on how many are sitting and where. So.
Okay. Right. It is the word is that it is in the pipeline.
Mm-hmm. It would be a pipeline project if it was approved. If this preliminary approval was
unless they could get to the point that he could pull building permits prior to the effective date of the fees, which isn't going to happen. So it would be a pipeline project.
Mr. Weaver?
I'd like to clarify again, in case I missed it. The materials on the exterior, could you, if it hasn't been said, could you say one more time? Is it the plaster?
Mr. Weaver, we're looking at that now. Right now, what we're looking at is we have plaster. We also have, instead of using wood for the siding, we're looking at 2 things, either a hardy board or we're looking at some type of metal treatment or stone treatment for that base. So that's still undefined, and we'll have that defined in the second stage.
If it was wood, it's going to be maintenance.
Correct. That's why we're staying away from that.
Would sure look a lot better at the lower levels. Trying to go by your code in here,
Sure.
I couldn't tell.
Could I clarify one other thing?
Yes.
This has been stated that this is a 28-unit apartment building. It's actually a condominium, so it's ownership housing. It's not rental housing that we're looking at doing. And I do have a little cut sheet, if it's appropriate. I think Mr. Quintero asked about the awning, and we have a little section with a little material sample to be able to look at it. But when we come back in stage 2, we'll have a full board and detailed information as the colors, the materials, and everything else.
Mr. Quintero?
Okay, well, my comments are that for comment number 1, I kind of like the idea of the overhang, not only to protect the stucco, but I just think it looks good. Then that's an interesting concept. Comment number 3, well, actually the recommendation, not official comments, but number 3, the idea of having 2 of those units with direct access. I don't know how that works in the overall look of the building, but it would certainly lead to a larger sales price for those individual units that have their own entranceway. Then comment number 4, absolutely, I think the podium should use decorative stone. I think that goes along with the overall craftsman type of look. The rear auto entry is a very, very good idea. That's one of the reasons that the building looks so good, and you sometimes see some really nice buildings in the city of Glendale, but unfortunately, when you've got all of that space dedicated to the automotive ingress and egress, it just really kills the design. So I think this is exactly what we're looking for. This is an urban design. We are going for an urban look in this particular Broadway neighborhood. This is literally the first one to be built on any of the side streets, and I think it's a great model for future developers and architects to go along this route. And Craftsman just sort of blends in with what that neighborhood used to look like, and there are still a few examples of Craftsman homes around and buildings that sort of mimic that style. So all in all, I'm pleased with the design of the building.
Okay, I think a lot of us have made our comments. The only thing I wanted to clarify, the suggestion of a pony wall, was that for the entire length of the property? Oh, I see, the curve. Okay, I don't have a problem with that. But here's a question it's really a legal question. You're telling me that no one could be arrested for trespassing in that 750-square-foot public open space area? Yeah, I mean, is that how we've described it? And
as far as I know, the way that the DSP language is written is it publicly accessible, meaning the public has to have a right to access it. And so I think
you can't exclude. Accessible is the opposite of excluding.
Correct. That's correct. And so obviously, if there was a property owner made a complaint of a potential trespass in this area, that'd probably be something that would have to be looked at that point. But the intent clearly of the ordinance was to make it publicly accessible, open to the public.
Interesting.
Yeah, which opens it up to potentially different types of violations, such as drinking in public and the like, where our ordinance does apply both to public open space and private open space.
Okay.
Loitering.
Well, I don't know about loitering, but
You have to be loitering with intent to do something else because of that U.S. Supreme Court decision, Kohler, a number of years ago.
Mr. Draven.
I want to come back to just a couple things. One is and this very issue is why I may, depending on the size and shape of that the configuration of that 750 square foot, have a question about the idea of an entrance out onto the front area, separate entrances from units, as is being suggested. I'm troubled by that in a way. It may command a higher dollar figure, as my colleague suggests, but if that is a shared common space that's there in front of the building, I'm not sure, and it's there for the public, so to speak, I'm not sure I would want to own a unit that has a front door that goes out to it. But that's just one comment. The other thing is, as someone who lived in South Glendale for a dozen years.
Get out.
Yeah, it's true. Actually, one of the first places I lived in South Glendale, when I moved in there, my colleague to my right here was the supervisor of the building project next door.
Oh, that's scary.
Isn't it? So, anyway...
it's a fine building, too.
Yes, it's still standing.
That's right.
So,
and will stand for a long time. I made sure of that.
Yes. Well, anyway, one of the two things that was most obvious to me was coming home from work and circling and circling and circling and circling and circling the block and having to figure in an extra almost half hour to everything I did after work, as most of my neighbors did, because simply no place to park. So the fact that we have sufficient parking for this project is a big plus as far as I'm concerned, and I also agree. For so many years, the design of a Glendale apartment house or condominium meant a big hole in the front of the building where everybody pulled up and drove down into a hole in the ground. And this is such a much nicer look to it. It reminds me more of buildings from other cities, even some of the west side areas where parking is accessed from the rear or an alley and so on. So I am pleased with those two aspects.
Let me close the public hearing before I forget. Mr. Weaver.
I like Spanish Mediterranean, but having said that, and I think now I'm sitting here as an architect wizard and look at these. I know what Mr. Loomis has said, but I think it's attractive, except I would use the stone, right color, right kind of stone on the lower part of it. Might be more in blend with the color that's going in above, but we'll have to see the palette. Now that I got my head straight on the 3-foot elevation up, no, I would not want to see steps in the front here. Destroy the layout of the rooms too. I'm always concerned nowadays with any of these projects, the security involved, and I'm sure I can't tell it here too much, but you're going to have security gates all over the place to get in. I wouldn't want to walk out the front door and be walking onto the street because you don't know who's walking by. And if you have kids in there, you're going to want it secured. I assume that on the south end, that is the ADA compliant ramp to get people in that way. That'll be secured. And I assume you're going to have a gate that will close to the garage, open and close to provide security there. So as far as I can tell, it's fine, you're parking it. They said coming off the alley is smart. We don't see that big hole in the front of the building. I think it'll be nice when it gets in. I can't find anything really to criticize other than I like the decorated masonry. And the crown on the top of the building, gosh, just drive by the Americana and look at them. They're there. We approved them.
That looks great.
A couple blocks away, it's pretty hard to say you should do it here. And the land around it is going to develop too, or redevelop. With a 10-story across, that's going to stay, but a lot of the other buildings around there, over time, will be replaced and will probably pretty much match what we see here. So I'm fine with it. I just know we'll see more when it comes back.
Mr. Quintero.
Mr. Howard, I've got a question. In terms of the open space and some of the potential issues for this building and others, could the ordinance be changed so that you do have an open space, but it's sort of only available to guests and residents? Or is that not really, well, obviously that's not that
We can do anything.
public open space. Maybe that's the way to keep unwanted visitors from hanging in front of these buildings.
Mr. Quintero,
Mr. Starbird?
Well, in that regard, I think about the fourth comment on the open space, and this is the second project where we've kind of seen there be a question about what the role of the open space is. I told Mr. Hagani, I think we need to bring back that general topic for a conversation with you and probably a joint meeting with the agency, and look again at what the DSP provides for and what all of that means and what our expectations are, and make sure we're all on the same page when it comes to that definition. And certainly if there's an adjustment to be made with the appropriate environmental review and process, the ordinance can be amended.
Mr. Weaver.
Just one generalized comment. Over the last year or two, the council has put into effect a lot of new criteria, things, indigenous trees, this item we're talking about, a whole number of things, and it's the shakedown time. We're now having to reassess what we did. It's a normal thing. We've tried to judge what is the right thing to do before. Now we're seeing the reality. Now we're going to go back and tinker with it. And this may be one that we will do that on. So there's no harm in that.
No, that's right.
Mr. Draymond.
Well, in terms of that very tinkering, the city manager's suggestion, I'm wondering if it's possible to do that before this comes back with for
They won't be
stage two.
back for at least 9 months.
And the reason is,
He just had a heart attack.
yeah, I noticed. The reason is that that is not one of the options, not a recommendation. It is not optional.
It's a mandate.
And I need to know, as a council member, whether the intention is open space as just the feel of it, or open space in the sense that I should be packing a brown bag lunch and heading over to Mr. Khan's building to have a picnic.
That's my idea.
And that's the difference that I need to know in order to know whether or not we're satisfying this. So,
And bringing your dog with
bringing my dog and
To relieve himself.
so, I mean, but in all seriousness, I don't. If it's a matter of the feel of open space, that's one thing, and that relates more to what Councilmember Yusefin was talking about more grass, plants, vegetation rather than pavers and concrete. If we're talking about in practicality, as Mr. Milano was talking about, guests or residents who are planning to sit and wait for, whatever, some kind of transportation or someone that's picking up a resident or whatever, that's a different story. If it's me coming over with a picnic basket with my family to have a picnic on your lawn, it's yet another meaning. So in order for me to ultimately come to a decision, I would like to have that discussion before this comes back.
Mr. Starbird?
Well, let me ask then, Mr. Khan, when would he expect to be in a position to come back for his Phase 2?
9 months?
Tomorrow.
If it's tomorrow, I'm sorry we can't accommodate you, but...
Mr. Starbird, we're currently doing our historic resource evaluation for the one site. That should be done within the next 2 to 3 weeks. So we would assume that we would be resubmitting, because unless there are significant design changes that are made here today, we would be resubmitting for the second stage shortly thereafter. So say in about a month from now, and then your staff would evaluate what we've submitted, and then bring it back. So somewhere between 6 to 8 weeks is very realistic.
And I think in that time frame, we can bring you back a discussion of the DSP. Obviously, if you were to make a change, though, that isn't going to be able to be implemented in that period of time because you've got a whole process. Right, Scott?
It just depends on what the changes are.
What the change is, right.
It may not require much.
Right.
Mr. Yusefi, then Mr. Quintero.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was going to say something, but I saw Mr. Howard keep having that look on his face, so I don't want to get into that because...
Yes, that very look.
Yes, that's the look. That's the look. And I guess what I get from him is this is not something that we should be discussing at this point. As Mr. Weaver was saying, there are things that are going to be modified. I did say something on the Planning Commission, so I will deal with it later on. I'll talk about it later. But at this point, I would like to move the motion that this approve the preliminary design for a new 4-story, 28-unit condominium units with 2 levels of subterranean parking for 63 spaces to be located at 128 and 132 South Kenwood Street, as outlined in the report to City Council dated October 23, 2007, from the Director of Planning. As far as I'm concerned, the way I'm introducing this with a modification that you put those pony walls around the entryway, and you will come back with some different materials as you talked about at stage 2 to let us know. But conceptually, I'm moving this conceptually as submitted to us conceptually.
Is all the guidance, like they say in the design review, consideration or direction?
Consideration.
So like we say, we think it ought to be stone, we're saying consider it, not directing you. And then we'll tell you later if we like it or not, if you don't do it.
Okay, is there a second?
Okay, I'll second it.
Any further discussion?
Well, just one more comment. I just want to be clear, Mr. Howard. I mean, I am still for public open space and all of the buildings that are coming online. I just think that the property owners need some sort of protection so that in the event a nuisance does exist, they can react.
I think, as Mr. Starbird noted, bringing that back with some of the nuances and everything from publicly accessible open space, what you have now, to restricting it down to something where the accessibility can be more visual, if you will, and temporal, as opposed to actually active, or where you can pack your picnic lunch or otherwise. So, and everything in between. Give you the opportunity to discuss that and see where you want to go.
Okay.
And some other fixes that DSP has caused, as I suggest you watch the Planning Commission and another project which was a mixed use that required several variances because our code, the way it's written, doesn't allow the project to happen because it just didn't anticipate it. So you may want to watch the Planning Commission. And as a matter of fact, two of them abstained, and several of them basically said, this is the third project we've seen, council needs to debug the system, or we're going to start turning these projects down. So, and it happens all the time as you approve. I mean, when you make new laws, there's going to be some problems, and then you tinker with it. So I think we need to start tinkering. So there's a motion I put out, and I guess there was a second.
Mr. Mayor, just one. I think Mr. Youssef already referenced the not apartment but condominium. Just change it to proposed condominium.
That's right.
They don't have a map yet.
They do not have a proposed. I will amend my motion to say proposed condominium.
And I'll buy into that.
Okay. Roll call, please.
Council members Freeman.
Yes.
Quintero.
Yes.
Weaver.
Aye.
Yusefian.
Aye.
Mayor Najarian.
Yes.
Move we adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second?
Second.
We are adjourned.